My name is Richard Curtis. I work for Adobe. I'm a solutions consultant with a focus on digital imaging. And today we're going to look at Lightroom. Now, we've been looking at Lightroom over the past few episodes, and we've been focusing on the workflow, so importing your pictures into Lightroom and how to get them in from the compact flash card or SD card onto your computer. Then we looked at organizing them, ranking them, we looked at keywording, and then we looked at global adjustments and how to make big changes to your pictures. But those big changes are really around everything in your picture rather than just very selective items. Sometimes when you're working inside Lightroom and you're working on your pictures, you might want to work on very selective areas as part of your image work. And today we're going to look at just that. We're going to look at selective adjustments inside Lightroom. So here's a picture that I have inside the development module inside Lightroom, and let me just hide some of these panels away just by clicking the little icons so I can see a bit more detail what's going on. Now, we're going to focus on this area here of Lightroom, and these are the adjustment brushes and adjustment panels. But I want to get this picture to a point where it's ready to develop. So I'm going to bring back the global adjustments very quickly, and I'm just going to do a couple of things. We looked last time at lens correction, so I'm just going to put a quick lens correction in here and get Lightroom to automatically fix any vignetting or any pin cushioning issues that I have with the picture out of the camera. And then we have in the profile, you can see there it was taken with a Canon 24 to 70mm lens. So it's picked that up from the metadata as we saw last time. Now, what we may also want to do is just look at the exposure. So let's look at the histogram, and we can see there that the highlights are really pushed up, and if we hover over here, we can see that the highlights are being clipped. Let's, for example, just turn this on now. We looked last time at doing that by just turning on the highlight indicator or pressing the J key, and we can do the same with the shadows. Let's go fix some of the highlights first before we really work on the picture. I'm just going to make sure solo mode's turned on by right-clicking on the menu item. My panels will collapse automatically for me. And then I'm just going to use the highlights slider here on the global adjustments to recover any highlight information. You can see there Lightroom does an amazing job at bringing back all that highlight information, and now we don't have any clipping items. So let's have a look at what we can do with this image and make it better. The first thing I notice is the sky is a bit bright, and we may want to do some work to it. And for that we have a tool inside Lightroom on the selective adjustments, and that tool is the gradient filter. The gradient filter can be found on the fourth item in, and we have now at the bottom left is show edit pins. This is showing me the mask that the gradient filter will create. The done button over here on the right hand side is when I finish that part of the edit. The way this works is that, and I can place many gradients on my image, is that I just need to pull the gradient in from the side. So I'm just going to pull the gradient in, so use my mouse. Lightroom places a little mask pin on the picture. It's non-destructive, so nothing's going to get damaged as part of this process. This pin will allow me to apply a selective adjustment to an area of a picture. I can very easily remove that pin by right-clicking on the pin and pressing delete, or hitting the delete key once it's been selected. The little black dot in the mask pin will tell you if it's been selected or not. Remember, you can have multiple pins, so you can move between pin to pin to do different adjustments. So let's just pull that back in again. The mask is created. It's a graduated filter, which means that it will feather off at certain points, so it will blend into the scene. If you look over here on the right hand side, we can modify different attributes of that gradient filter based upon what we want to do to the picture. So for example, we can change the exposure. Reset the exposure back to 0 by double clicking on the exposure name. The exposure was slightly higher, that's why it started clipping. And dial that back down and reduce the exposure in the sky. And you can see there, if I go too far, you can see it goes really dark. I don't want to go too far because it's starting to affect the clouds. So I'm going to pull it a little bit down like that just to increase a little bit of the exposure in the sky. I also may want to bring back some highlight information, and I can do that again by using the highlight slider, and you can see there that it tries to fix some of the highlights in the sky. If I'm not happy with where that gradient filter is placed, I can grab the pin. Notice the mouse changes to a hand, at which point I can then grab and move that around. I can create multiple ones. So say for example the grass area was also too light. So over here on the actual adjustment panel on the right hand side I can see the mask heading, and I can say new, and the new will turn off the selected pin and enable me to pull in a brand new pin. And you can see now what it's doing to the foreground as I pull that pin in, at which point I can then decide what that needs to look like. And I'm pretty fine with that, that's good. So I'm going to press done. The next thing I want to do is look at any problems that I have in the picture structurally. So anything that's really catching my eye. And I noticed a few things. One is this little piece of bracken over here on the right hand side. And we can get rid of that pretty quickly. The clone heal brush is available underneath the histogram. It's the second one in on the right hand side. And we get multiple options. When we choose this brush, we have the clone and we have the heal. The clone will take an area and replace another area exactly with it, and the heal will try and fix it based upon the content of the original area and the new area. So that's the difference between those two brushes. If we look at the brush, we see it's a round brush. But since Lightroom 5, we've now added a brush which enables us to draw the shape that we want to mask out. If I just move to the size slider, you can see I can change the size very quickly. If I move the feathering, you see the feathering start to change on the actual brush, and the opacity will be used when we apply the brush on the picture. That brush is a bit too big, so let's make it a bit smaller, and so it fits the picture. And it may be that you want to zoom in and look a bit closer. So I'm just going to bring in the fly out menu and just go 1:1. And you can see there I've zoomed right in, and my brush is much bigger now, so I can change the size of my brush. And now I've programmed the tablet so I can use this function key on the left. So you can see when I hold it down, it brings up the space, and space is used to bring up the hand tool. At which point I can just drag the image around using the pen or the mouse and get to the point that I would like to fix. And it's just over here with this bit of brush. I just find it a bit bright. My eye goes to it and I miss out the rest of the picture. So I'd like to reduce that or get rid of it completely. So I've selected the clone heal brush and I've changed the size. And the size is okay, but that's a bit small, but that's okay because I'm going to draw the area that I want to patch. All I do is draw on the image the patch. And you can see there it does a pretty good job of actually drawing around the area. So I'm just going to move this around, and you can see it blends in quite nicely. The tool is obstructing my view, so I just want to turn off and manage the tool properties. Down on the bottom left you have the tool overlay, and the tool overlay is set to always, which will always show you the tool. So if we just turn that to auto, that will automatically move away from the physical tool and show you the picture and the pins. If I move over the pins, it will then show me the actual marked areas, just like that. So you can see it's blended that fix in quite nicely. Now I can also use the feather command to blend it in a little bit more if it just wasn't quite right. So it gives me a lot of flexibility around fixing my images straight inside Lightroom. So you can see there it's done a pretty good job, and I've masked that out. So that was a very visual change that we made to the picture inside Lightroom. There are other elements inside a picture that you may or may not see easily, and that are things like dust marks or sensor smear or any kind of bright artifacts that stand out. And an easy way to see where they are is to use something called Visualize Spots. If I click on the Visualize Spots checkbox and show just a black and white mask, I'm then just going to use the space bar to move around the picture. Now I'm looking for any sensor marks and any areas of concern that I may have in the sky. It may be that I actually want to get rid of this mark on the picture, and I can also do it here and just click on that area and replace it in the picture. And I can keep moving around. And part of my processing and my workflow will be to go around the image looking for little spots and dust marks and things that need to be removed from the picture. It may be litter in a scene, or it may be wires, this type of thing, and I can use that tool to clean them up from the picture. That's kind of a spotting, cleaning process that we go through when we edit those pictures. Looking at the picture, we need to work out what we'd like to do next. But I think we can add some more contrast, and what I'd like to do is add some more contrast into the darker areas of the foreground. And particularly around the darker areas near these bushes over here. Now obviously if I try and apply a global adjustment, that's going to be applied to the whole image, not to that area. I could try using the gradient filter, but that's going to be just over everything and not the areas I need. So I need some more control. So to do that, I'm going to use something called the adjustment brush. The adjustment brush is in the far right of the adjustments panel, and I turn it on just by clicking on it. You can see under the adjustment brush you've got the mask, so you've got new mask and an edit mask, so you can go and edit the pins. Remember, the pins are used to secure the mask and place the mask on the image. There's no such thing as layers inside Lightroom, so you need to apply masks and then you apply more masks on those masks. But the whole point of Lightroom is it's non-destructive, therefore we like to do everything as you could do in the dark room. So in this case you just put a mask over the original image and that works just fine. And it gives you a lot of control. You can remove those adjustments or you can back out the whole adjustments completely. So that's a really nice working method. I want to apply some micro contrast. You can see on my adjustment brush I have the size of the brush, so I've got the size down here, and if I move that you can see it changes the diameter of the brush. Now notice there's a feather on the actual brush itself, and by modifying the feather I just modified the feather edge. So the size modifies the brush and the feather modifies the feather edge. And then the flow is the amount of mask I'm going to lay down, so the amount of adjustment that will be applied. We'll come into flow and density a little bit later on in the text, and we'll talk about how that works in more detail. So I'm going to keep that off here for now. Just work on the size. So I'm going to change my size. I want to work on these areas of contrast. So the brush needs to be quite small, probably about there. Yep, that seems to work fine. And the feather, yeah, that's okay, because I want to blend it in to the rest of the scene. Now, when I'm painting the mask, I like to see the mask initially, and then I'm going to remove the mask so I can see the adjustments. So I turn the mask overlay on. Now anything I do with the mask will be shown as red. We have all of the effects. We have the exposure, contrast, temperature, clarity, saturation. Everything we've looked at in the global adjustments, we can apply on a selective adjustment as well. We also have colour, so we can introduce different colours into the scene. So we could say, for example, paint this girl's jacket red. We'll look at that later on. I'm just going to put some painting in these areas now to accentuate the micro contrast. So the micro contrast is going to be darker, so I'm going to reduce the exposure and paint in those areas. You can see as I start painting, it places the mask on the picture, and the red marks are the areas where the adjustments will be applied, so you can see it's very selective. But you can also see they're very light, and I just did one stroke with the pen. That's because I have my flow set to low. If my flow was set to higher, every single stroke would apply the whole adjustment. So what I'm doing with a low flow is layering up the adjustments. So I've got much more control about what I'm applying. So I want to see what happens now. I think I've got a pretty good mask selected. And I just want to turn off the mask now and apply my adjustments. And I'm just going to dial the exposure down a long way so you can see this happening. And you see as I do that, the areas of contrast in the picture will change, and I start to add more micro contrast into those areas to give this image more punch and just a bit more dimension of the overall scene. Let's have a go at changing the girl's jacket to be a different colour. Go in here and zoom 1:1 and just use the program button on the tablet and the pen or the space bar on the computer and just navigate to the girl with the jacket. I'm going to place a new mask, so select the new mask. So every time I want a new area to mask off, I just need to select a new mask. And I'm just going to make sure I have the auto mask turned on. Auto mask will look at the edges of an object and then will automatically protect me from going outside the edge. So if I want to select the jacket, I just need to turn on the overlay so I can see what's happening. So you can see here, I'm just using the pen to paint on the jacket, and I've gone outside the edges slightly, but that's okay. If I hold down the Alt key, I turn the brush into a minus brush, so by default it's applying the mask. If I push the Alt key or just use the programmable key, it changes the actual indicator in the brush, changes to be a minus sign, and will start to enable me to remove areas of the mask, so I get complete control over what I'm painting. You see here the auto mask is working nicely. I'm painting the jacket, but it's not going outside. That's selecting it. Now that's working because I've initially applied pressure inside the jacket. When it looked at the edge contrast between that and the green, Lightroom says, oh, okay, well that's green, so I'm not going to paint in that area. So I just make sure that I select the color or tone, and that will protect me from going outside the edge. And there we go. That's a pretty good job. Now I'm going to turn off the mask. Let's go apply a color. So pick up the color and let's make it green. And then I'm just going to change the exposure. And you can see there that she's now got a bright green jacket. So you can see, but just by using the adjustment brush, we've selectively changed elements of the picture and enhanced it. You can see there that the girl really stands out in this scene. So other ideas that you may want to apply with this are things like whitening of the eyes. So you could place a mask on a model's eye during the white area and just increase the exposure by painting in the white areas of her eyes. Now the other thing I may want to do is to crop this picture. So the crop is on the left of the adjustment panel, and I'm just going to press the crop key now. And crop will put edge borders around the picture. The aspect ratio is defined under the little combo box flyout menu, and I can choose there a aspect ratio that people typically use. So I may want to use a 5:7 aspect ratio, and I can choose that, and what will happen is the actual crop size change dynamically on the picture, so I know exactly what I'm working with. Notice when I do that, the area of the crop that will stay in that aperture will be brighter than the rest, so you can see exactly where it is. The little lock icon will automatically be applied in that case, because you're keeping the aspect ratio to 5:7. But I can pull my corners of the crop, and it will always keep that aspect ratio intact at 5:7 for the whole picture. Once I've finished, I can press done. And I can undo the crop. That will undo the lock aspect ratio, which means I can then free flow my crop, make this a panoramic, or make it a bit closer to this girl in the scene. You may want to also straighten the image as well, and by using the little measuring ruler here, if I pick my horizon and draw my horizon in, I'll just make it a little bit larger so you can see the effect. It will automatically rotate the canvas inside the crop and straighten out that image for me. I'm just going to undo that because I don't really want that to happen. So I'm going to go back to my crop rectangle. So again, just using the history panel, go back to any point in time I'd like, and it puts me back to where Lightroom was at that point in time. So you can see there we've done a pretty good job. The only thing left really is to really accentuate the image. Now we can use something called effects, and we can then use the post-crop vignette to place an area of darkness around the edges of the picture to really focus us on the girl. But it may be that actually what we want is not a vignette, but we'd like to focus on the girl in the picture. So what we can do is use the radial filter, and that will enable us to draw an ellipse on the picture, and that ellipse will be a mask. We can then darken down the edges outside the mask by using the exposure slider or any other slider that we have inside the adjustment palette here, but we get a really nice effect. So that means that the effect will be all on the girl. When I press done, you'll see what I mean, is that actually now by just bringing the keyboard and pressing L for lights out, and you can see there that by looking at the picture, so it really pulls our eye in, so we can really you know, get the viewer to stay in the picture much longer, and that's why people used to burn these edges in place. So I hope that's given you a really good understanding of the localized adjustment or local adjustments inside Lightroom, and how you can use those adjustments to really change and edit your pictures and have much more control on the end result. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.